Chapter 1: Kaleidoscopic Problems of Life. The emerald green paddy fields swayed in the morning breeze as the rays of the scarlet sun bathed them in its light. The coconut and areca palms, the mangoes and the cashews were in full bloom. The farmers, the merchants, and the people of this small kingdom in India were happy about the peace and plenty that existed in the reign of the present king. Even the neighboring kings were happy with him and wooed his friendship. From the humblest of the farmers to the richest of the merchants, from the blacksmith to the general or the prime minister, everyone had only love and praise for the king, for he was a just, considerate, and an affectionate king. One day, the king's court was in progress, and the courtiers were discussing means and methods of improving the quality of life, for they had almost fulfilled the needs and thus improved the standard of living of the common man. Just then, a sage with matted locks and bark garments entered the court. The king and the courtiers received him with respect which was due to such enlightened persons. Occupying the seat offered to him, the sage inquired after the welfare of the king and his subjects. The king replied, without any false pride, that nobody in his kingdom suffered from either worry or unhappiness. The sage smilingly observed that the claim made by the king was truly a big one. The king assured the sage that he and his courtiers and assistants were constantly involved in improving the life of his subjects, and at that very time when the sage had entered the court, they were discussing the means to improve the quality of life. The sage only smiled and said that he would like to ask the king himself whether he was free from worry or tension. Thinking for a while, the honest king said that the worry of the welfare of his subjects did bother him, but that was natural. As being a king, it was his duty to look after the subjects, whereas all others did not have any reason for worry. The sage then called the minister and repeated the question. The minister said that he too was worried about working to the expectations of the king on one side and the people on the other. One by one, the officers and the courtiers said that they had both worry and tension. The king said that perhaps it was only natural for him and his team to be worried and tense, as they did shoulder a great responsibility. But he assured the sage that his subjects were free. The sage suggested that the king would accompany him in disguise to know the truth. The first person they encountered was a rich merchant who was worried about the ship carrying his goods, which was overdue and had not reached the port. A landlord was worried about fixing the marriage of his daughter. A teacher was worried whether he was efficiently teaching his students. An artisan was worried whether he would be able to carve the statue he had imagined. A farmer was worried whether the rains would spoil the harvest of the paddy. Every one of the persons they met had some worry or the other. The disappointed king said that he knew of a person who was definitely free from all worry and took the sage to a hermitage in the forest where a great yogi lived and practiced austerity. When they met him, he confessed that he was worried whether he would get the salvation in that very birth or had to take more births. Consoling the king, the sage said that worry and tension and discontent in every human heart has the capacity to improve the quality of life. It does not allow the human beings to rest and stagnate in self-complacence. There is a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, Yascha Mudatamo Loke यश्च बुद्धेः परंगतः तावुभौ सुखमेदेते क्लिश्यत्यन्तरितो जनः. Only two kinds of people are happy and free from tension: the utter fool and the one who has surpassed himself, gone beyond his mind, and attained the state of a Paramahamsa. All people in between are in varying stages of tension and sorrow. The above story as well as the verse point out that the common factor of humanity is tension and sorrow. The tension happens to be the organism's struggle for freedom, and in case of human beings, the tension and sorrow carry them forward. Awareness of bondage happens to be the first step towards freedom. In politics, we see that as long as the subject nation is unaware of its bondage, it is comparatively peaceful and free from inner tension. At the same time, it is also unaware of the joy of freedom. But a time comes when the subject nation feels that it is better to die than to be a slave, and with such a feeling begins both its life of tension and its march towards freedom. This has been observed in the history of our own country. Most of us take life as a mixture of happiness and unhappiness, success and failure, good and bad, meeting and parting, and other pairs of opposites. We accept the life as it is, perhaps with an apparent stoicism. That is due to the fact that life to most of us is nothing more than successful survival. In this sense, most of us are not much different from animals. A Sanskrit saying declares this: Ahara nidra bhayamaithunancha samanyametat pashubhirnaranam buddhirhi tesham adhiko vishesho buddhirvihinam pashubhir samanaha. Food, sleep, fear, and procreation is common between animals and human beings. The capacity to think alone is the differentiating factor, and without it, men and animals are equal. Food, sleep, fear, particularly fear of death, and procreation are common to all creatures in their march for survival, and they form the tenets for survival. And it apparently appears that man has used his capacity to think in improving his survival skills. He has better food, better means to sleep, better ways in combating sickness, and means for safety and security. And he is the only being who uses the means of survival not only to survive and propagate his species, but also to derive pleasure. However, a deeper observation reveals that the capacity to think and analyze, which the shloka refers to as buddhi, has helped us increase our problems and thus our tensions and sorrow, which in turn reward us with discontent with what we have or what we are. The discontent with what we have has given birth to two very powerful offspring, that is, science and technology. But the discontent with what we are bring in a realization that human being is bound by so many things. This awareness in turn makes him ask some fundamental questions. What are the problems that all ail humanity? Amidst the infinite human beings that inhabit this planet with their infinite problems, are there any common factors? Trying to answer these questions can help us understand the human bondage and how to move towards freedom, not unlike the diagnosis of a disease, which happens to be the first step towards its cure. The first thing that strikes us is the habit of our unending desires, or our constant meditation on what we have not. Most, if not all, our time is spent on what we lack and also on what others possess. This perpetual attention on the other breeds comparison at the physical, material, as well as psychological levels. Result of such comparison is competition in every field. Misery is evident as only a few can succeed in winning the race, and the others have to be content with followership or becoming non achievers. Since we either do not accept our position or give up so easily, jealousy is the next fruit, followed by frustration, anger, and fury or violence. Connected with desire and following very closely at its heels is the expectation, which happens to be the greatest bane in human relationships. We tend to correlate with others only after inspecting them through our spectacles of expectation. We expect everyone to live up to our expectations and paradoxically never bother to even give a thought as to what others expect from us. When we are not occupied with desires, there is anxiety, worry, and fear as our attention is on what we have, and there is a great concern about losing it. Even with desires, we have these feelings as we are anxious or worried or afraid of the possibility of the desires being fulfilled or otherwise. Worry and doubt also manifest in the form of indecisiveness as the mind is involved with pros and cons. In this sense, though the worry is related to the desires, it can even stand independently. Boredom happens to be another problem facing humanity. It is the inability to have a sustained interest in anything or person or thought. Consequently, the mind starts seeking a change in the sense object, relationship, or milieu. Restlessness of mind is the characteristic of boredom. Desires, worry, and boredom happen to be the three major problems of the mind, and most of us have the capacity to face them. We try to work and put effort to fulfill our desires. Desires, or kama as it's called in our culture, happens to be the first of Chaturvida Purushartha, the four pursuits or aims of human existence. To fulfill the desire, we earn artha or means like the material or money, which has been called as the second Purushartha. The worry that afflicts us in pursuit of the desire or in an effort to guard what has been acquired is also faced by most of us rather gallantly. Most of us are endowed with a defense mechanism that suddenly comes to our rescue when the worry crosses the permissible limit. It may come in the form of a consoling thought that somehow it will be taken care of. Similarly, when boredom visits us, we meet it by changing the object or milieu, as when we are bored of reading, we switch on the TV or go for a stroll. The most important thing is that these three problems are accepted as inseparable from life. Desires, worry, and boredom have percolated into our behavior and relationship. We transact with and relate to not the persons, but with their images we have in our minds about them. The images are formed by our likes and dislikes, which in turn are governed by our desires and expectations. That is, we tend to be judgmental over others. At the same time, we do not want others to judge us. The society, which is nothing but a large group of individuals, has laid down certain code of conduct and etiquette. Though this is necessary for the smooth functioning of the society, it has introduced an avoidable habit of wearing masks in most, if not all. Most of the time, our aggression irritation, or anger and violence are covert. Life thus has become complicated with its jumble of feelings, reactions, and counter reactions. Consequently, our so called happiness or pleasure turns out to be just a relief from tension or misery. And peculiarly enough, many of us appear to enjoy misery. We glorify sickness, pain, and exhibit it whenever there is an opportunity. The reason for this is that such behavior creates a wave of sympathy or pseudo love and attention from our companions who are otherwise involved just as we are involved in our own desires and selfish interests. Love is only a word we use, which for us really connotes a feeling to extract something from the other and to fulfill our own desires. We look at one another with a utilitarian eye of expectation, but the deep hunger for real love, which is characterized by concern, caring, and sharing, continues to gnaw at us. Unconsciously, we are aware that the shades of these can be experienced by us through our companions when we either fall sick or are hurt or are in pain. Because at such times of suffering, everyone pays attention to the victim. In other words, we tend to misunderstand someone's sympathy to be love, or at least try to compromise with it. That is how quite a few amongst us suffer from hypochondria or the abnormal anxiety about our health. Some of the modern psychologists have made a startling discovery. Since man does not experience any positive happiness, and what he experiences is only a relief from tension or pain, he tends to get addicted to misery. This is because he is familiar only to pain and has a resistance to go to the unfamiliar or uncharted ground of positive happiness. Dr. Eric Berne, the progenitor of transactional analysis, a psychoanalytic way of understanding human personality, calls such behavior as the racket, which he defines as the self-indulgence in feelings of guilt, inadequacy, hurt, fear, and resentment. Indulgence and involvement are the other ways of overcoming our anxiety, tensions, and misery. Indulgence in sensuality of any kind, be it gluttony or sex or alcoholism, or other forms of intoxication like drugs, resulting in forgetfulness of suffering, is the easiest resort we adopt when one has either the understanding of the harm of sensuality or is even afraid of its consequences. One chooses to involve oneself instead in activity which has far-reaching consequences on one's being. Such indulgence with work has been aptly called as workaholism. While the indulgence is at the level of body and senses, the involvement is at the level of the mind. Fantasizing about future or brooding over the past is one of the most common of the pastimes. This makes us forget the harsh ground reality of the present. The nature and the world are characterized by multiplicity. There is infinite variety, be it the species of beings or human nature. The more one gets involved with the world, the more diverse it becomes, creating confusion and chaos. To avoid this confusion, each one of us tends to build a wall around, the wall of exclusiveness, or the wall of likes and dislikes, or the wall of I, not I, instead of searching for the bridge of unifying factor that is at the substratum of all existence. Just as all the islands in the sea are connected at the bottom, or as the banks of the river connected to each other at the bed, each being is connected to others. In reality, the other is only at the surface. The bitter seed of disintegration, by its very nature, cannot yield the sweet fruit of union, which alone brings about peace and joy. Then there is the problem of underachievers and the old and the infirm. Swami Ranganathananji writes, "It appears as though the three E's of entertainment, excitement, and exhaustion have taken possession over us. In spite of its glitter, in spite of its mirth and laughter, modern industrial civilization hides beneath its polished face a much sad song. There is a tremendous moan beneath the society. Its fierce competitive milieu has no place for the thousands who fail in life. Neither has it any honored place for the old and the infirm who have ceased to be productive individuals. The aged man, on his part, also loses faith in himself even before others lose faith in him. The atmosphere around him whispers to him, 'You are unwanted.' The stream of youthful life flows by him, but he is stranded on the sands. He feels squeezed out and thrown on to the scrap heap, as it were, and sadness, dejection, and utter loneliness descend upon him. Desiring or worrying or boring has become the nature of many. For such persons, spirituality offers a great remedy. Adi Shankaracharya, speaking on the utility of spiritual texts in general and Upanishads in particular, declares in his commentary on Mandukya Upanishad, "Rogartasyaiva roganivrittei swastata tatha dukkhatmakasyatmano dvaita prapanchopashame swastata advaita bhavaha shastram prayojanam." Just as for the person afflicted with disease, a healthy state happens to be the eradication of the disease, for a person afflicted with misery, overcoming the feeling of multiplicity, which is the cause of misery, is the annihilation of the misery. That is the utility of the Shastras, which bring about Advaita Bhava, the no otherness. There is a basic anguish in every human being. In spite of reaching out to the stars, his feet are grounded by the anguish. The thorn of the feeling of discontent is permanently pricking him. Every time he achieves something in which has, in his own opinion, was a prime achievement, he realizes he has hardly moved from his earlier position of discontentment. Reasons there are for this cross of anguish which the human beings are forced to carry. It does not require much effort to know them. All we have to do is to observe the world and ourselves a little more keenly. Most of us take this human life as a be-all and end-all of existence. Consequently, all our activity, including thought and feeling, is used only for the prime purpose of survival. Survival is necessary, nay, mandatory, but the survival is for a definite purpose. All beings survive for the horizontal growth characterized by a healthy and long life. But for the human beings, healthy and long life is for vertical growth characterized by understanding, love, harmony, and peace. Ishavasyopanishad gives out a warning call to such persons who forget this aspect of life. It says, "Asurya namate loka andhena tamasavratah तांस्ते pratyabhigachanti yeke chatmahano janaha. Into the world of asuras, enveloped by the blinding darkness, verily do they enter after death, who are the slayers of the Atman. We should not go by the words, but by the mood of the above verse. Forgetfulness of the inner being is as good as slaying it, while the asuras or demons symbolize such beings who do not have any finer human feelings. With all its progress, the humanity has fallen down to the demoniac nature of utter selfishness, cruelty, violence, jealousy, greed, and other negative qualities. The situation is truly grim and appears like the blinding darkness mentioned above. An airplane that is designed to fly and grace the skies is really being used as a bullock cart on a rough country road. It can neither serve as a bullock cart nor does it fulfill the purpose for which it is designed. Necessarily, when man, who is meant to chart the wide open skies of freedom, is chained on to the earth for survival, it has to result in his anguish. Paradoxically, this very anguish is the blessing to human life. It acts as a good goad for his vertical growth. Animals do not have any anguish. It appears as if they have only one purpose in life, and that is survival. As they accept life, they accept death when it comes. There is nothing like a fall for the animal because there is no deceit and hypocrisy. But there is also no ascent in human life, in animal life, as there is no experience of fulfillment or ecstasy. The animal life is governed by the instincts which are unconscious. Man, however, has started stretching in his sleep of the unconsciousness. He has started realizing the limitations of this sleep. Man is not fully awake and conscious, but only partially conscious. Human beings normally tend to feel comfortable in familiar situations. Similarly, they feel more comfortable in their unconsciousness as they are familiar to it. This resistance to change from the familiar condition to a fully conscious condition that is totally unknown is but natural. But man cannot play deaf ears to the call of the Atman, the unknown, or rather unknowable, as it is infinite and eternal. Its power is too overpowering not to affect man. He is forced to take up this adventure himself sometime or the other. The Upanishads speak of this adventure. The goal is laid out by the Upanishads is without limit, but the words which have to be used and are the only available means of expression are limited. And yet, the rishis in their infinite compassion have used the words so effectively that one cannot conceive of any other better way. Using reasonable discussion, dialogue, stories, paradoxical expression and symbology, the sages from their inconceivable heights tried to lure the suffering human beings to embark on this divine adventure. The Upanishads thus bring light to the world of darkness. Nay, they convince the adventurer that the darkness itself is a myth.